exactly in the German manner, and the soldiers stamped twice on the wooden floor with their hobnailed boots. Marinese had opened his eyes and raised his head again, and every time they stamped their feet, he perceived a light touch on his shoulder. He soon realized that it was the handle of a grenade, tucked diagonally into the belt of the man on his left. In that moment, the idea took hold. It's probable that, at least in the beginning, he hadn't considered using the grenade to save himself, to open up a path with his own hands, even though, as we shall see, his final actions cannot be interpreted otherwise. It's more likely that he was moved by hatred and rancor, feelings that had become habitual to us by then, almost an elementary reflex, toward those blond men in green, well-nourished and well-armed, who for many months had forced us to live in hiding. Perhaps more than that, he wanted to take revenge, and yet at the same time cleanse himself of the shame of a final escape, the shame that weighed and still weighs on our souls. In fact, Marinese had a gentle soul, and none of us thought him capable of killing, except in self-defense, revenge, or anger. Without turning his head, Marinese carefully groped for the handle of the grenade, the type shaped like a stick with a timer, and, bit by bit, he unscrewed the safety cap, using the jolts of the vehicle to conceal his movements. This operation was easy enough, but Marinese never would have thought that it would be so difficult to occupy and get through the last 10 seconds of his life. He would have to fight hard, with all his will and with all his physical strength, so that everything would go according to plan. He dedicated his last few moments to this alone, not to self-pity, not to the thought of God, not to taking leave of the memory of those he loved. With the cord firmly in his grasp, Marinese tried to imagine, in an orderly fashion, what would happen in the 10 seconds between the rip and the explosion. The Germans might not notice, might simply register his sudden movement, or might understand everything. The first option was the most favorable. The 10 seconds would be his own, his time, to spend as he wished, perhaps to think of home, perhaps to think of how he would manage, taking shelter at the last minute behind the man on his right. But then he would have to count to 10, and that thought was strangely worrisome. Fool, he thought suddenly. Here I am racking my brains with the cord in my hand. I could have thought of it sooner, couldn't I? Now the first son of a bitch who sees the cap missing. But no, I can always pull, no matter what happens. He laughed to himself. Even a situation like this has its advantages. Even if they hit me in the back of the neck, even if they shoot me. But yes, thanks to some mental mechanism, evidently illusory and distorted by the imminence of the decision, Marinese felt sure he could pull the cord no matter what, even the very instant he lost consciousness, perhaps even the instant after. But unexpectedly, out of some unexplored depths, from some recess of his body, the animal, rebel body that has trouble deciding to die, something was born and grew beyond measure, something dark and primeval, and unfathomable because its growth arrests and then replaces all the powers of knowledge and determination. It dawned on Marinese that this was fear, and he understood that in a moment it would be too late. He filled his lungs to prepare for battle, and pulled the cord with all his might. Rage was unleashed. A paw struck his shoulder, followed by an avalanche of bodies. But Marinese was able to tear the bomb away from the belt and roll up like a hedgehog, face down, his knees drawn up against his chest, the grenade wedged between his knees, his arms tight around them. The fierce blows of fists, musket butts, and heels rained down on his back. Hard hands tried to violate the stronghold of his contracted limbs, but all in vain. It was not enough to overcome the insensitivity to pain and the primordial strength that, for just a few moments, nature grants us in a time of dire need. For 3 or 4 seconds, Marinese lay under a pile of bodies writhing in violent battle, every fiber of his being contracted. Then he heard the squeal of the brakes, the truck stopping, and the rushed thuds of men jumping to the ground. At that instant, he said,